Okay, French speakers, don't be mean to me. I think her name is Nathalie du Pasquier. If you're a big fan of 80s furniture design, you are going to love this week. Natalie was a member of the Memphis Group, which was a design group out of Milan that was responsible for the way a lot of the really extreme 80s furniture look was. This is the Memphis Group. And she now is a painter. She does paint objects, but we're going to be looking at form this week. And I think she's just such a great example of really simple. Some of them are more flat, some have more dimension. There's shadows in some, reflections in some. Her color palette's kind of awesome. There's reference to things like ketchup bottles. So I'm going to have a very simple still life with just a lot of simple forms and shapes. And she has a lot of different styles too. I think some of them she becomes very abstract and very minimalized. Some are more, created here with the horizon. This is an earlier work, so this might inspire some of you. She deals with reflections and distortion of glass. So I'll have some glass there for those of you who want to experiment with that, which is a whole different. We once did a shiny objects and glass class. We could do that again if you guys enjoy this. Yeah, and so we'll look at too some of the influences of her are kind of interesting in terms of offering different palettes and offering just kind of the story of still life painting. I watched a lecture where she kind of mentioned this is one thing, Chekuri, which is a Korean type of still life, and it means books and things. And she was inspired by this, which you can see when you look at it. It's objects, it's straightforward forms that kind of build surfaces. It's kind of these shelves and these little areas. I think it could be really fun to play around with. This one kills me. I love this one. Yeah, and so this was I think like late 1700s, early 1800s type, a traditional. Of course, Morandi. I put this in here. He inspired Nathalie du Pasquier also, but I think this palette, I can imagine a few of you doing the palette. Notice the form is slightly less pronounced. Some of these are straight up flat. There's a little bit of shading. We're going to be working on form and shading. But again, the palette's kind of interesting. This starts becoming a little surreal here. And just some exciting, not too much shadow. There's some shadows being cast, but definitely more form than du Pasquier. I cannot say her name, so I'm just going to say Natalie. Yeah, I love these palettes. And also, she was influenced by Giorgio de Chirico, who is kind of more surrealist. But you see some elements here of long shadows, bits of classical, nods to classical, fruit, lots of form. We're going to be looking at lots. How do you do shadows? I saw a lecture where they compared this to Hopper, and you see actually these long shadows and these kind of isolation that he ends up using. This one's interesting because it's about being abandoned by your lover. This woman is and then in the tiny little bit, you see the ship, which I never noticed till I watched this lecture. So sometimes it's good to watch lecture. Chardin, don't have a huge deep knowledge of his work, but he was another person that inspired Natalie. So I'm throwing this in just so you get more ideas of palette. Again, glassware, the themes of fruit and glassware and stuff, very traditional pots. People like shiny objects because they're very hard to paint. So if you paint them well, especially back then, you were a real virtuoso. And just the dark, moody palettes, which I can walk you through palettes. So we're going to look at how you use light and shadow to create form. So basically, a shape is just a 2D thing, and the way you turn a 2D shape into a 3D form is by adding shadows and emphasizing where light hits something. So like in this quick painting I did, you look for where the light's coming, that's the first thing you do, and then you just kind of add shadows. There's a few things to know about shadows. One is there's cast shadows, not the shadows that are made by an object, and then the form shadows are the shadows on the object. They're created by light. And so we're going to talk a lot about this tomorrow. You're going to look where your light source is, where the hottest part is, the highest value, where the darkest value is, and then the different tones in between. And I'll walk you through this. We'll look at cast shadows and what that means about the light. And we're just going to really work on perfecting how you get form. Another thing to know about shadow is the darker it is, the less detail it is. The lighter it is, the more detail. So when you're painting something really bright, you're going to get all the nuances of that form. And again, this is the highlight we'll look at, halftone, darkest area, and then reflected light, which is at the bottom, and cast shadows. So we'll be looking at that tomorrow. And I think it's just a really good exercise to start. Some of you might want to always paint flat. You might want to never. You might want to do some of those Nathalie paintings that are flat. But we also think of light and shadow in terms of the grayscale. So like white to black and then different grays. But you can actually use value with color too. And I'll just briefly talk about it. This is an example of value in color. I wish I could credit this from Pinterest, but I love this. It shows that there is value in color as well as just black and white. And one way you can do that is the color wheel. On part of your color wheel, there has a grayscale. And so a higher, like a brighter part where the light hits it would be a different value than the part of the shadow. And we'll go through that tomorrow. So that if you want to depict a yellow, you want to get the high and lower parts, but you want to use multiple colors, then you can use your color wheel. You could have the highest, lightest yellow-green, and the darkest part of your shadow could be a blue-violet. So I can help anyone with that. So you don't have to be limited when you're doing value to just black or white. By knowing these value levels and using your color wheel, you can do what I did here in this and create light and shadow with a variety of colors, like the one on the left here, the still life. So if anyone wants to do that, we can do that, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow and paint. Okay, have a good night. Thanks.